Close your eyes and let me ask you something. Look around the room you're in right now, or imagine the room if your eyes are already closed. How many objects can you see? How many things within arm's reach were made by human hands, designed by human minds, manufactured to serve human purposes? Dozens, probably. Maybe hundreds if you count every small thing. The device playing this audio, the bed or couch you're lying on, the blankets covering you, the walls around you, the lights, the clothes you're wearing. Every single object in your environment is a tool of some kind, something created to make human life easier, safer, more comfortable. We live surrounded by tools. We're so immersed in technology that we barely notice it anymore. It's like asking a fish to notice water. Technology is simply the medium we exist in. We wake up and check our phones. We brush our teeth with manufactured brushes and engineered toothpaste. We eat food that was grown with machines, transported by vehicles, stored in refrigerators, cooked on stoves. We dress in clothes made in factories from materials processed through dozens of industrial steps. We travel in metal boxes powered by controlled explosions or stored electricity. We work with computers, communicate through satellites, entertain ourselves with screens. Technology everywhere. Technology always. Technology so constant and so pervasive that we've stopped seeing it entirely. But it wasn't always this way. There was a time, not so long ago in evolutionary terms, when your ancestors had almost nothing. No houses, no clothes, no containers, no weapons beyond what they could pick up from the ground. They were naked apes in a dangerous world, competing with predators who had millions of years of evolutionary head start. Predators with claws and fangs and speed and strength that humans could never match. Think about that for a moment. Imagine yourself stripped of everything. No tools, no weapons, no shelter, no fire. Just your body, exactly as it is right now, dropped into the African savanna of 3 million years ago. How long would you survive? Lions are faster than you. Leopards can climb better than you. Hyenas have stronger jaws than you. Snakes are more venomous than you. You can't outrun most predators. You can't outfight any of them. Your teeth are pathetic for combat. Your nails are jokes. Your skin is thin and tears easily. You have no fur to keep you warm at night, no natural weapons to defend yourself, no built-in tools to process food. By any objective measure, humans are poorly designed for survival. We're slow, weak, fragile and vulnerable. We should have gone extinct millions of years ago, just another failed experiment in the great laboratory of evolution. And yet here you are, not just surviving but thriving. Not just existing, but dominating the entire planet. How did that happen? How did a relatively weak, slow, clawless, fangless primate become the most successful large animal in Earth's history? The answer is tools. Tools changed everything. Tools transformed a vulnerable prey animal into an apex predator. Tools allowed humans to adapt to every environment on Earth without waiting for biological evolution. Tools created civilization itself. A human without tools is prey. A human with tools is the most dangerous creature the world has ever seen. If you're using this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I made it. So settle in, get comfortable, pull the covers up around you, those covers that are themselves tools, manufactured objects designed to keep you warm. And let me tell you about the 20 tools that kept your ancestors alive. 20 inventions, spanning millions of years, that made your existence possible. 20 pieces of technology so important that without any single one of them, you might not be here tonight. This isn't just history. This is the story of how we became who we are. The story of human ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. The story of your great-great-great-grandparents, multiplied by thousands of generations, figuring out how to survive in a world that was trying very hard to kill them. We'll start at the very beginning with the first shaped stone and work our way through millions of years of innovation. We'll see how each tool built on what came before, how each invention opened new possibilities that led to further inventions. We'll understand how a simple sharpened rock eventually led to the smartphone in your pocket. This is your inheritance. This is the accumulated wisdom of 3 million years of human problem solving. This is the toolkit that made you possible. Let's begin at the beginning. Let's start with stone. Chapter 1. The Stone Foundation. Tool number 1. The chopper, where it all began. The oldest known stone tools in the world come from a site called Lomekwi in Kenya. They're 3.3 million years old. Let that number sink in for a moment. 3.3 million years. That's before our genus Homo even existed. These tools were made by earlier hominins, probably Australopithecus or a similar species, creatures that were more ape than human but were already doing something no other animal had ever done. They were deliberately shaping stone to create an edge. The Lomekwi tools are crude by later standards. They're called choppers, and they're exactly what they sound like. A fist-sized rock with a few flakes struck off one edge to create a rough cutting surface. Nothing fancy, nothing beautiful, just a rock made slightly sharper than nature made it. But think about what this represents. Some ancient creature, perhaps not even capable of language as we understand it, looked at a round stone and imagined it differently. Imagined it with an edge. Imagined what that edge could do, and then made it real. That's not just tool use. Lots of animals use tools. Chimpanzees use sticks to fish for termites. Crows use twigs to extract grubs. Sea otters use rocks to crack shells. Elephants use branches to swat flies. Tool use is common in the animal kingdom. What makes the Lomekwi choppers different is that they were manufactured. They didn't exist in nature. Some proto-human mind conceived of them and then brought them into being. That's creation. That's technology. That's the beginning of everything. To make a chopper, you need to understand something about how stone breaks. You need to know that certain types of rock, when struck at certain angles, will fracture in predictable ways. You need to select the right raw material, not just any rock, but one with the right properties. You need to identify a striking platform, a place where you can deliver a blow that will remove a flake. You need to control the force and angle of your strike. None of this is obvious. None of this is instinctive. It had to be learned, probably through long observation and trial and error. And once learned, it had to be taught to others, passed down through generations, accumulated over time. The chopper represents the birth of human culture. The birth of technology as a cumulative enterprise, where each generation builds on what came before. The birth of the process that would eventually produce everything from the wheel to the internet. What could you do with a chopper? Not much by modern standards. But in a world without knives, without scissors, without any cutting implement at all, a sharp edge was revolutionary. You could cut meat from a carcass. Early humans were probably scavengers as much as hunters, following predators and driving them off their kills with numbers and noise. But a dead animal with its hide intact is hard to exploit with just teeth and hands. The hide is tough. The meat is firmly attached to the bone. Without some way to cut, you're left gnawing at whatever you can reach. A chopper changed that equation. With a sharp edge you could slice through hide. You could cut meat away from bone. You could access parts of the carcass that would otherwise be wasted. The calories you could extract from a single kill increased dramatically. You could also crack bones to get at the nutritious marrow inside. Marrow is incredibly calorie-dense, rich in fat and nutrients that the brain needs to function. Some researchers think that access to bone marrow was crucial for the evolution of larger brains. The energy had to come from somewhere, and marrow was a source that other predators couldn't easily exploit. You could cut plant materials, stripping bark from trees, cutting tough roots into manageable pieces, processing fibrous plants. The vegetable portion of the human diet became more accessible with a cutting edge. You could sharpen sticks. A pointed wooden stick is itself a tool, useful for digging, for defense, maybe eventually for hunting. The chopper enabled the creation of other tools, multiplying its value. For over 1 million years, the chopper was the height of technology. Generation after generation made them, used them, and presumably taught their children to make them. 1 million years of the same basic tool design, passed down through countless generations. If that seems like stagnation, remember that 1 million years is an unimaginably long time. Modern humans have existed for only 300,000 years. Recorded history covers only 5,000. The chopper was humanity's primary tool for a span of time we can barely comprehend. And then something changed. Someone figured out how to do it better. Tool number 2, the hand axe, 1 million years of perfection. Around 1.7 million years ago, a new tool appeared in the archaeological record. Archaeologists call it the Acheulean hand axe, named after Saint-Achille in France, where examples were first formally studied, and it represents a quantum leap in human technology. The hand axe is larger than a chopper, typically 6 to 8 inches long, sometimes bigger. It's teardrop-shaped, with a pointed end and a broader base, but the most striking difference is symmetry. A hand axe is carefully shaped on both sides, flaked all the way around, creating a balanced, regular form. Imagine holding one. It fits perfectly in your palm, the broader end resting against your palm, the pointed end extending past your fingers. The edges are sharp all the way around. The point is useful for piercing. The wide end fits comfortably in your grip, giving you control and leverage. It's beautiful, actually. Not just functional, but aesthetically pleasing, with a symmetry that goes beyond what's strictly necessary for the tool to work. Early humans were making hand axes long before they were making art, but there's something artistic about a well-crafted hand axe. Something that speaks to a desire for form as well as function. The hand axe was the Swiss Army knife of the prehistoric world. You could use it to butcher an animal, slicing through hide and cutting meat from bone. You could use it to dig for tubers, prying them from the hard earth. You could use it to chop wood, processing branches into usable material. You could use it to scrape hides, removing fat and flesh to prepare leather. You could use it to shape other tools, using its edge to work wood and bone. It was the all-purpose tool that our ancestors carried with them, everywhere they went. The one thing you would never leave behind. And they carried it for an astonishingly long time. The Achillean hand axe remained essentially unchanged for 1.5 million years. That's not a typo. The same basic design, the same manufacturing technique, used by generation after generation of humans from 1.7 million years ago until perhaps 200,000 years ago. Nothing in the modern world has lasted anywhere near that long. The hand axe is the single most successful tool design in history. Why didn't it change? This is one of the great puzzles in archaeology. Were early humans simply unable to innovate? Were they stuck in a cognitive rut, capable of learning the technique but incapable of improving it? Or maybe the hand axe was already perfect for its purpose. Maybe 1.5 million years of stability represents not stagnation, but optimization. The hand axe was the optimal solution to the problems early humans faced, and there was simply no need to change it. Modern experiments suggest the hand axe was remarkably effective. Its edges, when freshly knapped, can be sharper than modern steel scalpels. Its symmetry distributes force efficiently when cutting. Its shape allows for a variety of grips depending on the task. It's a sophisticated piece of engineering disguised as a simple rock. Making a hand axe requires skill, considerable skill. You can't just bash rocks together and hope for the best. You need to select the right raw material. Fine-grained stone that will flake predictably. Flint is ideal. Obsidian works beautifully. Certain types of quartzite and chert are good. But limestone, granite, sandstone, these won't work at all. You need to plan your approach. Before striking a single blow, an experienced napper visualizes the finished tool inside the raw stone. They see where the flakes need to come off, in what order, at what angles. The entire process is planned before it begins. You need to prepare platforms. Each flake needs a place to strike, an angle that will direct the force correctly. Sometimes you need to shape the edge to create the right platform before you can remove the flake you actually want. You need to control your strikes with precision. Too hard and you shatter the stone. Too soft and you don't remove the flake. Wrong angle and the flake goes somewhere unexpected, ruining your plan. The motor control required is extraordinary. Your ancestors knew what they were doing when they made hand axes. They selected specific types of stone that would flake predictably. They planned their strikes carefully, each blow building on the previous one. They visualized the finished tool inside the raw rock and worked to reveal it, much like Michelangelo claimed to see the statue already present in the marble. This wasn't mindless repetition. This was skilled craft, passed from master to apprentice across thousands of generations. Hand axes spread with human populations. You find them across Africa, across Europe, across Asia. Wherever Homo erectus went, and later Homo heidelbergensis and other species, hand axes went with them. The technology was so successful that it became universal. The hand axe defined human life for longer than any other tool. It's part of who we are, written into our evolutionary history, part of the selection pressure that shaped our hands and brains. When you pick up a tool that fits comfortably in your palm, when you feel the satisfaction of a well-designed object doing its job perfectly, you're connecting to something very old. Something that's been part of being human for almost 2 million years. Tool number 3, the stone blade, sharper than surgery. Let your mind drift forward now, past hundreds of thousands of years, to a time when humans had developed an entirely new approach to stone tools. Instead of shaping a core into a hand axe, They learned to strike thin, flat blades from carefully prepared cores. Each core could produce dozens of sharp blades, maximizing the cutting edge you could get from a single piece of raw stone. This is called the Levallois technique when it first appears in a simpler form, around 300,000 years ago. By the Upper Paleolithic, starting around 50,000 years ago, blade technology had reached its full development. The blades produced are long, thin, incredibly sharp, and remarkably consistent. Line them up, and they look almost machine-made, so regular and precise. A freshly struck stone blade is extraordinarily sharp. When researchers have compared them to modern surgical scalpels, the stone blades sometimes perform better. They can be sharper at the molecular level than any metal, though they're more brittle and lose their edge faster. There's an almost paradoxical elegance to this. The most advanced cutting tools in human history, until very recently, were made of stone, the same basic material our ancestors were using 3 million years ago, but worked with such skill, shaped with such precision, that they exceeded anything we could make from metal until modern manufacturing techniques were developed. Imagine what this meant for our ancestors. Imagine being able to cut through tough animal hide like it was paper. Imagine butchering a carcass in a fraction of the time it used to take. Imagine the competitive advantage of having access to the best cutting tools that had ever existed. But the blade technology offered more than just sharpness. It offered efficiency. Think about it this way. A hand axe is a solid piece of stone with edges. The ratio of cutting edge to total stone is relatively low. Most of the stone is inside the tool, not on the edge. A blade is different. A blade is almost all edge. It's thin and flat, so almost all the stone is available for cutting. The ratio of cutting edge to total stone is much higher. What this means in practice is that a skilled knapper could produce 10 or 20 times more cutting edge from a given piece of stone using blade technology than using the old hand axe approach. In a world where good stone was often scarce, where you might have to trade or travel significant distances to get the best materials, this efficiency was precious. The blade technology changed the economics of stone tools. You could get more done with less material. You could carry more tools with the same weight. You could extract more value from every piece of quality stone you acquired, and blades could be hafted. They could be attached to wooden handles to create knives. They could be mounted on spears to create deadly weapons. They could be combined with other materials in ways that hand axes never could. They were modular, adaptable, the foundation for a whole new generation of compound tools. The blade also enabled specialization. Different blade shapes for different purposes, long blades for cutting, shorter, sturdier blades for scraping, pointed blades for piercing. The one-size-fits-all approach of the hand axe gave way to a toolkit of specialized implements, each optimized for a particular task. This specialization reflects a broader pattern in human evolution. Over time, our tools became more diverse, more specific, more numerous. The simple toolkit of the early Stone Age, dominated by a few general-purpose tools, expanded into the complex toolkit of the Late Stone Age, with dozens of distinct tool types for specific purposes, and this expansion continued. It continues today. The number of distinct tool types in use has grown exponentially over human history. The trend that started with the stone blade, the trend toward specialization and diversification, is the trend that produced the modern world. Tool number 4, the scraper. Processing the kill. Not all stone tools were for cutting, some were for scraping, and scrapers represent one of the most common and important tool types in the prehistoric toolkit. Picture a scraper. It's a stone flake with one edge worked into a steep angle, not sharp like a blade but strong and durable. When you draw it across a surface with pressure, it removes material efficiently without cutting through. The steep edge resists the force of scraping without breaking. What were scrapers for? Primarily for processing animal hides. When you kill an animal and want to use its skin for clothing or shelter, you can't just peel it off and wear it. The raw hide has layers of fat and flesh clinging to the inside. It has hair on the outside that might need to be removed depending on your purpose. It's stiff and will rot if not treated properly. Processing a hide is labor-intensive work. First, you stretch the hide out flat, maybe pegging it to the ground or lashing it to a frame. Then you scrape and scrape and scrape, removing all the tissue from the inside surface. Fat, flesh, membrane. Everything that isn't the leather itself needs to come off. Then, depending on what you're making, you might scrape the outside to remove the hair, or you might leave the hair on for warmth. The other way, more scraping, more careful removal of material. Then you might tan the hide with brains or other substances. The tanning process stabilizes the leather, preventing rot and making it supple. And yes, many traditional tanning methods use animal brains. The saying, "every animal has enough brains to tan its own hide," is more or less true. Then more scraping, working the leather to soften it. Back and forth, over and over, until it's flexible enough for your purposes. Every piece of leather clothing your ancestors wore, every hide tent they sheltered in, every leather bag they carried required hours of scraping, days of scraping for a large hide, and they did this with stone tools on their hands and knees, with patience and skill that most modern people couldn't match. Think about a leather shirt. Think about how many scraping strokes went into processing that leather. Thousands, tens of thousands maybe. Hour after hour of repetitive motion, pushing the scraper across the hide, removing material bit by bit. The scraper marks on ancient hides are still visible sometimes when conditions preserve them. Parallel striations where the stone edge dragged across the surface. Evidence of all that labour, all that time, all that patient work that made survival possible. Scrapers also had other uses, scraping wood to shape spear shafts, scraping bone to make tools and needles, scraping plant materials to prepare fibres. Any task that required removing material from a surface without cutting through it called for a scraper. They're not glamorous tools. They don't have the beautiful symmetry of a hand axe or the deadly elegance of a blade. But they were essential. Every toolkit excavated from a prehistoric site contained scrapers, often in large numbers. Our ancestors couldn't have survived without them. The scraper reminds us that technology isn't just about dramatic innovations. It's also about the mundane tools that make daily life possible. The humble implements that don't attract attention, but do essential work. The background technologies that we barely notice but couldn't live without. Tool number 5. The Burin, precision carving. The last of our stone tools is the most specialized and perhaps the most sophisticated. The Burin is a stone tool designed for precision work, specifically for carving and engraving hard materials. A Burin has a characteristic chisel-like tip, created by striking small flakes off the end of a blade to create a strong, narrow edge. That edge can be pushed into bone, antler, or ivory to create grooves. It's not for cutting or scraping, but for incising, for carving into resistant materials. The technique for using a Burin is different from other stone tools. You hold it like a chisel and push it forward, the narrow edge digging into the material. By making parallel grooves and then breaking out the material between them, you can shape hard materials with surprising precision. The Burin made possible a whole category of tools that couldn't be made from stone alone. Bone needles with tiny eyes for thread, bone and antler harpoon points with barbs that would hold fast in prey, ivory figurines and ornaments, antler spear throwers, bone awls and punches. Without the Burin, none of these would exist. Stone is useful for many things, but it's not good for everything. Bone, antler, and ivory have properties that stone lacks. They're flexible where stone is brittle. They can be shaped into forms that stone can't hold. They're available from animal kills that are already happening. The Burin opened up these materials for human use. It was the key that unlocked a whole new category of technological possibility. When you see the delicate artistry of Upper Paleolithic bone tools, when you marvel at the tiny eye of a bone needle or the intricate barbs of a harpoon point, remember that all of that was carved with a Burin. A small piece of stone, carefully shaped, that allowed human creativity to express itself in materials that would last for tens of thousands of years. The Burin also made possible some of the first art. The engravings on cave walls, the carved patterns on tools and weapons, the decorative designs on bone and ivory, many of these were created with Burins, art and technology intertwined, as they would continue to be throughout human history. There's something profound about the Burin. It's a tool for making tools, a meta-technology that enables other technologies. This kind of layered innovation, where tools are used to make other tools, is a distinctively human pattern. It's what allows our technology to compound over time, each innovation enabling further innovations in an accelerating spiral that continues to this day. Let those 5 stone tools settle into your mind as you drift towards sleep. The chopper, the hand axe, the blade, the scraper, the Burin. 5 ways of shaping stone that shaped human history. 5 technologies that your ancestors developed over millions of years, each one building on what came before, each one opening new possibilities for survival and creativity. Stone was the foundation. It was where technology began. It was what our ancestors had to work with when they had almost nothing else. And they made it into something remarkable. They made it into the basis for everything that would follow. But stone was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Weapons of the Hunt Tool. Number 6. The Wooden Spear. Death at a Distance. We're going to shift now from stone to wood, from tools for processing to weapons for hunting, because hunting was central to human survival for most of our history, and the weapons we developed for hunting were among the most important technologies we ever created. The oldest known wooden spears come from a site called Schöningen in Germany. They're about 300,000 years old, preserved in waterlogged conditions that prevented the wood from decaying, and they revolutionize our understanding of early human hunting. These aren't crude pointed sticks. They're sophisticated weapons, carefully shaped from spruce trees. Each spear is about 6 feet long, worked to remove bark and knots, shaped to a point at one end. And here's the remarkable thing. The balance point is placed forward, about a third of the way from the tip, exactly like modern javelins. Whoever made these spears understood ballistics. They knew how to create a weapon that would fly true and hit hard. This wasn't luck or accident. This was engineering. The Schöningen spears were found alongside the butchered remains of wild horses. These weren't scavenged kills. These were hunted horses, brought down by coordinated human hunters with thrown spears. Our ancestors were apex predators 300,000 years ago, capable of taking down large, fast animals with nothing but sharpened wood. Think about what that required. Think about the planning, the coordination, the skill. First, you need to select the right wood. Not all trees produce good spear material. You need wood that's strong but not too heavy, straight-grained so it won't warp or break unpredictably, flexible enough not to shatter on impact but stiff enough to fly true. The Schöningen hunters chose spruce, a good choice that suggests they knew what they were doing. Then you need to shape it. The raw branch or sapling needs to be stripped of bark, all the irregularities removed, brought to a consistent diameter. The point needs to be carefully carved, tapered evenly, sharp enough to penetrate but not so thin that it will break on impact. This shaping was probably done with stone scrapers and blades. Maybe you fire harden the tip. This is a technique used by many traditional peoples. You char the point in flames, then scrape off the carbonized wood. The heat compresses and toughens the wood fibers, making the tip harder and more durable. It's a simple treatment that significantly improves the weapon. Then you need to balance it. This is the part that shows real sophistication. A javelin needs its center of gravity in front of the center of the shaft for stable flight. The Schöningen spears achieve this through careful shaping, thicker toward the front, thinner toward the back. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate design. And then you need to throw it accurately. This isn't easy. Javelin throwing is an Olympic sport, and modern athletes train for years to master it. Your ancestors learned these skills as children, practiced them constantly, became so proficient that they could bring down running horses. A horse is not an easy target. It's fast, alert, and can kill you with its hooves if you get too close. Hunting horses with thrown spears requires teamwork. You need multiple hunters working together, approaching from different directions, coordinating their throws, following wounded animals until they weaken. The spear changed everything about human hunting. Before spears, humans had to get dangerously close to their prey. They could scavenge, driving predators off kills. They could trap animals in natural cul-de-sacs. They could chase prey to exhaustion in persistence hunting. But actually killing a large animal with just rocks in your bare hands is incredibly dangerous. With spears, you could kill from a distance. You could stand back and throw, putting several meters between yourself and those dangerous hooves and horns. The risk dropped dramatically. The reward stayed the same. A hunting band with spears was a formidable thing. Coordinated throws from multiple hunters could bring down almost any animal. Wounded prey could be followed until it weakened. The caloric return on successful hunts increased dramatically because the risk of injury went down, and protein meant survival. Meat is dense with calories and nutrients. Fat is essential for brain function, for cell membrane construction, for absorbing certain vitamins. A reliable supply of animal protein allowed human brains to grow, allowed human populations to expand, allowed humans to move into new environments where plant foods alone wouldn't sustain them. The wooden spear was probably the first true weapon, the first tool designed specifically to kill. Not a tool for processing, not a tool for everyday life, but a weapon. It transformed humans from prey to predator, from hunted to hunter. This is one of the great turning points in human history, the moment we became truly dangerous, the moment other animals started needing to fear us rather than the other way around. It happened because someone figured out how to throw a sharpened stick really effectively. Let me tell you more about what hunting with spears was actually like. Imagine yourself there, 300,000 years ago, part of a hunting band tracking horses across the grasslands of what would someday be called Germany. You've been following this herd for 2 days. Not chasing them, that would be pointless, they're faster than you. Just following, at a distance, waiting for an opportunity. The herd knows you're there. They're wary, but you're patient. You carry 3 spears, each one carefully made over many hours of work. The weight is familiar in your hands. You know exactly how each one flies, their individual quirks, which one throws truest and which one hits hardest. The other hunters spread out as you approach a place where the terrain favours you. A slight rise that will let you throw downhill. A gully that will channel the horse's escape route. This isn't random. You've planned this. You've hunted here before, or places like it. The signal comes. Everyone rises and throws together. Your spear leaves your hand with practiced ease, arcing toward the herd. Other spears fly alongside it. For a moment the air is full of wooden shafts. Not every spear hits, not every hit is fatal, but enough connect. A horse stumbles, another breaks from the herd, wounded. The others flee, but you're not interested in them. You're focused on the injured ones. The chase begins. Not a sprint, you can't outrun a horse even when it's wounded, but a steady jog, following the blood trail, watching for signs of weakening. The wounded animal will slow, it will tire, it will stop. When it does, you approach carefully. A wounded animal is still dangerous, but eventually it falls, too weak to resist. And then the real work begins. Butchering with stone tools, carrying meat back to camp, feeding your family, your band, your children. This scene, or something like it, played out millions of times across hundreds of thousands of years. The spear made it possible. The spear fed humanity. Tool number 7. The stone-tipped spear. Adding edge to force. Wooden spears worked, but stone tips made them work better. By 500,000 years ago, and certainly by 300,000 years ago, humans were hafting stone points onto wooden shafts. They were creating compound weapons that combined the reach and balance of a spear with the cutting power of stone. A stone-tipped spear penetrates deeper than a fire-hardened wooden point. The stone edge cuts through hide and muscle where wood would be stopped. It creates larger wounds. It causes more bleeding. It kills more reliably. But hafting a stone point onto a wooden shaft is not trivial. It's a multi-step process that requires planning, materials, and skill. First, you need to make the point itself. Not just any stone flake will do. A spear point needs to be the right size and shape, symmetrical, with a base that can be attached to a shaft. The beautiful laurel leaf points of the Solitarian culture, thin and perfectly shaped, represent the pinnacle of this craft. Then you need to prepare the shaft. You need to split the end of the wood, or carve a notch, or create a socket, some way for the point to attach. The fit needs to be tight. Loose attachment means the point falls off, or twists on impact, wasting all that effort. Then you need to bind them together. Plant fibers, stripped from stems and twisted into cordage. Animal sinew, the tough tendons that run along animal spines and legs. Rawhide strips cut from fresh hides. Any of these can wrap around the joint, pulled tight and knotted. Sometimes you'd add adhesive, tree resins collected and heated into a sticky mass. Birch bark tar, made through a complex process of dry distillation. Even crude glues made from boiled hide or fish parts. The adhesive fills gaps, adds strength, helps the binding hold. The hafting technology was as important as the stone point itself. A beautiful point means nothing if you can't attach it to a shaft. The compound weapon only works when all the components come together properly. This kind of compound technology, multiple materials combined into a single tool, is something our lineage started doing hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's a pattern that would repeat over and over throughout human history. The bow combines wood and cordage. The arrow combines shaft, point, and fletching. A modern car combines thousands of different materials and components. Compound technology is human technology. The stone-tipped spear was humanity's main weapon for hundreds of thousands of years. It brought down mammoths and mastodons, horses and bison, deer and antelope and wild cattle. It defended camps from predators. It was used in conflicts between human groups. Every hunting scene you might imagine from the Ice Age, every prehistoric drama of humans facing dangerous animals, featured stone-tipped spears. They were the defining weapon of the Paleolithic, the tool that let humans punch above their weight in the competition for survival. Tool number 8. The Atlatl, multiplying human power. Sometime in the Upper Paleolithic, perhaps 30,000 years ago or earlier, someone invented a device that transformed spear hunting. We call it the Atlatl, from the Nahuatl word used by the Aztecs, who were still using this technology when Europeans arrived in the Americas. The Atlatl is a spear thrower. It's a stick, maybe 2 feet long, with a hook or socket at one end that engages the butt of a dart or light spear. You hold the Atlatl in your hand, place the dart in the hook, and when you throw, the Atlatl acts as an extension of your arm. The physics are elegant. When you throw something, the speed of the projectile depends on how fast your hand is moving at the moment of release. Your hand is attached to your arm, and your arm has a certain length. The longer the lever, the faster the tip moves. The Atlatl increases the effective length of your arm. Instead of releasing the dart from your hand, you're releasing it from the tip of the Atlatl, which is moving faster because it's at the end of a longer lever. This translates directly into projectile velocity. A dart thrown with an Atlatl travels significantly faster than a hand-thrown spear. Depending on the thrower's skill and the specific equipment, the speed increase can be 50% or more. The dart hits harder, it flies farther. It's more accurate at longer distances because it gets there faster, giving gravity and wind less time to affect its flight. Modern experiments show that an experienced Atlatl user can throw a dart at 100 miles per hour or more. That's in the range of a professional baseball pitch. The dart can penetrate completely through a deer at reasonable distances. It's a devastating weapon, and it's easier to use than you might think. The learning curve is gentler than for bow and arrow. Children can become proficient relatively quickly. Within a few weeks of regular practice, most people can hit targets consistently at hunting distances. It doesn't require years of training. The Atlatl also has mechanical advantages beyond just speed. The throwing motion is different from a spear throw, more like a sweeping overhand that engages different muscle groups. Some people find they can throw longer with an Atlatl before getting tired. The strain is distributed differently. The projectiles are different too. Atlatl darts are lighter than thrusting spears, shorter and slimmer. This means a hunter can carry more ammunition. 5 or 6 darts are much easier to transport than 5 or 6 heavy spears. More shots means more chances to hit. The Atlatl allowed hunters to engage prey from farther away, staying safer while remaining deadly. It allowed smaller projectiles that were easier to carry. It extended the range of human predation into new territories and against new prey. You can find Atlatls in the archaeological record across the world. They were used in Europe during the Ice Age, shown in cave paintings and found in archaeological deposits. They were used in North America for thousands of years before the bow arrived. They were used in South America, in Australia until recent times, across many parts of the world. The technology was invented independently in multiple places because it was so useful. It's a natural extension of human throwing ability, an optimization that different cultures discovered on their own. When you see Ice Age cave paintings of hunting scenes, the hunters are probably using Atlatls. The long, thin darts they're throwing are Atlatl ammunition. This was the standard hunting technology of the Upper Paleolithic world, the weapon that fed families and tribes across tens of thousands of years. Tool number 9, the bow and arrow, the weapon that conquered the world, and then came the bow. The bow and arrow is the most important weapon ever invented, with the possible exception of firearms. It's been found on every continent except Antarctica. It remained the primary projectile weapon for most of human history, from its invention until guns replaced it just a few centuries ago. It transformed hunting and warfare alike. The oldest certain evidence for bow and arrow comes from around 64,000 years ago in South Africa, where small stone points that are clearly arrowheads have been found. These points are too small and light for hand-thrown spears or Atlatl darts. They only make sense as arrowheads. The technology may be older, but organic bows and wooden arrows rarely preserve in the archaeological record. Wood rots, sinew decays. Only the stone points survive, and even then only when conditions are right. We know the technology by its signatures, not by finding the actual bores. A bow is a spring. Two flexible limbs connected by a string bent back and held under tension. When you draw the string back, you store energy in the bent limbs. When you release, that stored energy transfers to the arrow, launching it forward. This is different from throwing weapons in a fundamental way. With a spear or Atlatl dart, all the energy comes from your arm and body at the moment of release. With a bow, you build up energy over time as you draw, storing it in the limbs, then releasing it all at once. You can put more energy into the arrow than you could generate with a single explosive motion. A skilled archer can shoot arrows accurately at targets over 50 yards away. Competition archers with modern equipment can hit targets at hundreds of yards. Even with primitive bows, the effective hunting range is substantial. The arrow moves faster than an Atlatl dart. It's more accurate because the release is cleaner, no need to coordinate a throwing motion. You can carry more arrows than darts. A quiver of 20 is not unreasonable, while 20 Atlatl darts would be absurdly cumbersome. You can shoot more quickly with a bow than with an Atlatl. An experienced archer can lose several arrows in the time it takes to recover from an Atlatl throw and reload. In a hunting situation, this means multiple shots at a moving target. In warfare, this means devastating volleys. The shooting motion is different too. An Atlatl throw involves your whole body, arms sweeping overhead. A bow draw is more static. You stand planted, draw, aim, release. This means you can shoot from concealment more easily. You can shoot from positions where a full throwing motion would be impossible. You can shoot without revealing your position. The bow also requires less physical strength than effective Atlatl throwing. The draw weight of the bow does the work, not just your arm strength. Women, older people, and younger people can be effective with bows in ways that Atlatl use never allowed. Archery democratized projectile hunting. But the bow is harder to make and harder to master than the Atlatl. A good bow requires selecting the right wood. Yew is classic with its combination of flexible sapwood and springy heartwood. Osage orange is superb. Various other woods work in different regions, but not every tree will do. You need to know what you're looking for. The wood needs to be seasoned properly, dried slowly over months or years to prevent cracking. The stave needs to be shaped carefully, following the grain, thickening at the handle, tapering toward the tips. A bow made against the grain will break. A bow with the wrong taper will shoot poorly. Then you need to string it with strong cordage. Sinew string is traditional and effective. Plant fiber cordage works. The string needs to be the right length, creating the right amount of bend in the limbs when braced. Arrows need straight shafts, which is harder than it sounds. You need to find straight shoots or branches, dry them without warping, and true them if they bend. The shaft needs to be the right weight and stiffness for your bow. Too stiff, and it won't flex properly around the bow on release. Too flexible, and it wobbles in flight. Then fletching for stability. Feathers split and attach near the back of the shaft, angled to spin the arrow in flight. The spin stabilizes it like a football spiral, keeping it flying point first. 3 feathers is traditional, spaced equally around the shaft. Then the point. Stone for hunting big game, napped to the right size and shape and hafted securely. Bone or antler for some purposes. Even hardened wood tips for small game. Making a complete bow and arrow set is a project. It takes time, skill and knowledge that must be learned from someone who already knows. And learning to shoot well takes longer than learning the Atlatl. Archery requires developing muscle memory for a complex motion. The draw, the anchor point at your face, the release that must be clean and consistent. It takes practice, lots of practice, to become proficient. But the bow's advantages outweigh these costs. Wherever the bow appeared, it eventually replaced the Atlatl as the primary hunting weapon. By the time Europeans arrived in the Americas, the bow had replaced the Atlatl almost everywhere, except a few regions of Mexico and the Arctic, where specialized conditions favored other approaches. Let me take you through what it was like to hunt with a bow. Picture yourself in a forest, maybe 10,000 years ago, somewhere in what will someday be called Europe. You've been sitting motionless behind a fallen log for hours. The deer you're hunting doesn't know you're here. It's grazing peacefully, moving slowly through the underbrush. You've been watching it since dawn. Your bow is strung, an arrow nocked but not drawn. Drawing too early tires your arms. You wait. The deer moves closer, then closer still. It's within range now, maybe 30 yards, but the angle is bad. too much brush between you and it. You wait. The deer steps into a clearing. For a moment, nothing is between you and it. This is your chance. You draw in one smooth motion, the string coming back to your cheek, the bow arm extending, your body a perfect machine for launching arrows. You don't consciously aim. After years of practice, your body knows where the arrow will go. You release. The arrow crosses the distance in a heartbeat. The deer leaps at the sound, but too late. The arrow is already there. It hits behind the shoulder, driving deep. The deer runs, but not far. A well-placed arrow is a killing shot. You follow, not hurrying. The deer has gone maybe 100 yards before it collapsed. When you reach it, it's still. The arrow did its work, now comes the real labour. Butchering in the field, carrying the meat home, processing the hide. But that's later. Right now, in this moment, there's just the satisfaction of a successful hunt. The knowledge that your family will eat well tonight. This scene, or something like it, has been repeated billions of times across human history. The bow made it possible. The bow fed humanity through ice ages and warm periods, through good years and lean years, across every continent where we spread. Your ancestors were archers. For tens of thousands of years, the bow put meat on the table, defended camps from predators, and decided conflicts between groups. It's one of the most important tools ever invented. Tool number 10, the snare and trap. Hunting while you sleep. Not all hunting requires direct confrontation. Some of the most effective hunting technologies work while the hunter is elsewhere, catching animals without any human present at the moment of capture. Traps and snares are ancient. We don't know exactly how ancient because they're usually made from perishable materials, wood, plant fibers, leather, that don't survive in the archaeological record. But the concept is simple enough that it probably goes back hundreds of thousands of years. A snare is a loop of cordage positioned where an animal will pass. The loop is held open by some mechanism, maybe just propped against vegetation. When an animal puts its head or foot through the loop, it triggers the snare. The noose tightens, trapping the animal. Simple snares just restrain. The animal is caught but not killed, held in place until the hunter returns to dispatch it. These are effective for animals that don't chew through cordage and can't pull free. More sophisticated snares incorporate spring mechanisms. A bent sapling held under tension, released when the snare is triggered, jerks the animal into the air. This prevents escape and sometimes kills outright through strangulation or neck breaking. Traps take many forms. Pitfall traps, where animals fall into concealed holes. The pit might have sharpened stakes at the bottom, or it might just be deep enough to prevent escape. Pitfall traps were used for everything from rabbits to elephants. Deadfall traps, where a heavy weight drops onto the animal. The weight is propped up precariously, held by a trigger mechanism that releases when disturbed. The animal touches the trigger, the weight falls, and the animal is crushed. Cage traps that confine without killing. These are useful when you want to capture animals alive, maybe for domestication, or to kill at a later time when the meat is needed. Fish traps that guide fish into enclosures from which they can't escape. Weirs that span streams, funneling fish into confined spaces. Basket traps that fish swim into but can't find their way out of. Each design targets specific animals in specific situations. There's no universal trap. You need different approaches for different prey. The beauty of traps is efficiency. You set them up once and they work continuously. While you're sleeping, while you're gathering plants, while you're making tools or doing anything else, your traps are hunting for you. A hunter with 10 snares set along animal trails is effectively in 10 places at once. Traps also catch animals that would be difficult to hunt directly. Small, quick animals like rabbits and squirrels, too fast and too small to be worth chasing with spear or bow. Nocturnal animals that are active when humans can't see to hunt. Wary animals that flee at the slightest sign of human presence. The protein from trapped animals might not be glamorous. No dramatic stories of hunters facing dangerous prey. But it was reliable. A few snares producing a rabbit here and there added up over time. For many prehistoric peoples, trapped small game was probably a more consistent food source than the occasional large kill. And trapping could be done by anyone. You didn't need the strength and speed required for pursuit hunting. You didn't need the eyesight for archery or the throwing arm for Atlatl. Elderly people, children, injured individuals, pregnant women, all could set and check traps. Trapping spread the work of food acquisition across the entire group. The snare is made of cordage, which we'll discuss later. Without the ability to make strong, flexible rope, snares wouldn't work. This is another example of how prehistoric technologies depended on each other, each invention enabling others in a web of interconnected capabilities. Tool number 11, the bola tangling prey. One more hunting tool deserves mention before we move on. The bola is a throwing weapon consisting of weights connected by cords. You swing it around your head to build momentum and release it toward your target. The weights separate in flight, and when they hit, the cords wrap around the target's legs, bringing it down. Picture the physics. You have 2 or 3 stones, each attached to a cord, all the cords tied together at a central point. When you whirl this assembly and release it, the stones fan out, spinning through the air in a spreading pattern. When they hit an animal's legs, the momentum wraps the cords around, entangling the limbs. Bolas are particularly effective against running animals. The legs are already moving, which helps the cords wrap. An animal in full sprint hits the ground hard when its legs are suddenly tied together. Birds taking flight can be brought down with bolas. Ostriches or rheas sprinting across open ground. Even deer and guanaco and other fast-moving game. Any animal that relies on its legs to escape can be tangled and brought down by a well-thrown bola. The technology appeared independently in multiple places. South America is where it's best known, used extensively on the pampas for hunting rhea and guanaco, and later for herding cattle. It was so effective that Spanish colonizers adopted it from indigenous peoples, but bolas or bola-like weapons also appear in other contexts. Australian Aboriginal peoples use similar devices. There's evidence for weighted throwing objects in prehistoric Europe, though whether they functioned exactly like South American bolas is debated. The weights survive archaeologically. Stone balls, sometimes grooved for cord attachment, found in contexts that suggest throwing use. But like so much prehistoric technology, the perishable components, the cords, are usually gone. We're left to infer function from the parts that preserve. Like so many prehistoric tools, the bola represents human ingenuity solving a practical problem. How do you stop a running animal? You tangle its legs. How do you tangle its legs from a distance? You throw something that wraps around them. Simple logic, elegant solution. These hunting tools, taken together, made humans the most effective predators the world had ever seen. Not through strength or speed, which we lack. Not through fangs or claws, which we don't have. Through technology. Through the compound spear and the Atlatl and the bow and the trap and the bola. Through human minds solving the problem of how to acquire meat. Rest now and let these weapons settle into your imagination. Picture your ancestors on the hunt, armed with tools they made themselves, working together to bring down prey that was faster and stronger than they were. Technology versus biology. Mind versus muscle. Humanity's oldest story. Chapter 3. The Mastery of Fire. Tool number 12. The fire drill. Creating flame from friction. Fire changed everything. This isn't hyperbole. Fire is one of the most transformative technologies in human history, maybe the most transformative. Its effects ripple through every aspect of human life. Fire cooked food, making it safer and more nutritious. Cooking kills parasites and pathogens that would otherwise make you sick. It breaks down tough fibers, making more of the food's calories available for digestion. It detoxifies certain plants that would be poisonous raw. The human digestive system actually evolved to expect cooked food, becoming smaller and less energy intensive because cooking did some of the digestive work externally. Fire provided warmth, allowing humans to survive in cold climates where they would otherwise freeze. It extended the habitable range of the species from tropical Africa to Ice Age Europe and beyond. Anywhere you could maintain a fire, you could potentially survive. Fire gave light, extending the usable hours of the day. When the sun went down, fire allowed activity to continue. Toolmaking, cooking, socializing, all the activities that required light could happen after dark. The human day grew longer. Fire frightened predators, creating zones of safety in a dangerous world. Lions and leopards and hyenas avoided the flames. A campfire at night meant you could actually sleep rather than spending the darkness in constant terror. Fire could be used as a tool in itself, burning grassland to drive game, clearing brush to make travel easier, hardening wooden spear points, smoking meat for preservation. The applications multiplied as humans experimented, but for most of human history fire was found, not made. Lightning strikes ignited wildfires. Volcanic activity created flames. Spontaneous combustion in certain conditions could start fires. Early humans learned to use fire, to tend it, to transport it from place to place. Evidence for controlled fire use goes back at least 400,000 years, maybe much further. But using fire and making fire are different things. Using fire means keeping alive a flame that already exists. Making fire means creating flame from nothing. Imagine what it meant to depend on found fire. If your fire went out, you had a serious problem. You might have to travel days to find another group willing to share embers, or wait for a lightning strike, which might not come for weeks or months, or go without fire entirely, with all the dangers and hardships that implied. Fire was precious, fire was life, and fire was precarious, always at risk of going out, always needing attention, always one mistake away from disaster. And then someone invented the fire drill. The fire drill is the most common method of friction firemaking across human cultures. The basic idea is simple. You spin a wooden drill rapidly against a wooden fireboard. The friction generates heat. The heat creates a coal. The coal ignites tinder. Simple in concept, difficult in practice. You need the right materials. Not any wood will work. The drill and the fireboard need to be made from specific types of dry, not too hard, not too soft wood. Woods that are too hard won't generate enough friction. Woods that are too soft will just wear away without getting hot enough. You need something in the middle. Different cultures found different woods that work. Willow, cottonwood, cedar, yucca, certain types of palm, many others depending on the region. Knowledge of which local woods would work for firemaking was essential survival information. The drill needs to be straight and round, maybe a foot or two long. The fireboard needs a small depression to hold the drill's tip, and a notch cut into the edge of that depression. The notch is crucial. It allows hot dust generated by the friction to collect in one place. That accumulated hot dust is what becomes the coal. You also need tinder, something fine and dry that will catch fire from a tiny ember. Shredded bark, dried grass, cattail fluff, bird down, many materials work. The tinder needs to be prepared in advance, gathered and processed and kept absolutely dry. Now for the technique. You kneel over the fireboard, 1 foot holding it steady. You place the tip of the drill in the depression, holding it upright. You place your palms on either side of the drill near the top, and you spin. You rub your hands together with the drill between them, pushing down as you spin. Your hands move down the drill as they spin, so you have to keep moving them back up. Spin and push, again and again. The friction heats the tip of the drill and the depression in the fireboard. Smoke starts to rise. Hot dust, dark and powdery, begins to accumulate in the notch. You keep going, faster, harder, smoke pouring from the contact point. Then, if everything goes right, the accumulated dust starts to glow. A tiny ember forms, red and smoking, nestled in the notch. You stop spinning, carefully tip the ember onto your tinder bundle and begin to blow, gently at first, then more forcefully. The tinder catches, flames appear, and you have fire. The whole process takes several minutes of sustained effort. Your arms burn with exertion. Sweat drips despite the intense focus. The first few times you try, you probably fail. Not enough speed, or not enough pressure, or the wrong materials, or giving up too soon. But once you've mastered it, you can make fire anywhere. You're never dependent on finding fire again. You can travel into unknown territories, confident that you can create warmth and safety wherever you go. Fire becomes truly yours, a portable technology you carry in your skills rather than in your hands. The fire drill appears independently in cultures across the world. It's found in Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas, Australia, the Pacific Islands. Everywhere humans went, they invented or carried this technology with them. It's one of the most universal human inventions. There are variations. The hand drill, described above, is the simplest but most exhausting. The bow drill wraps a cord around the drill, and sawing the bow back and forth spins the drill faster with less effort. The pump drill adds a flywheel that maintains momentum. Each variation makes the process a bit easier, but the core technology is the same. Friction creates fire. When did humans learn to make fire? We're not sure. The evidence is frustratingly sparse. Finding evidence of fire use is hard enough. Finding evidence of firemaking specifically is even harder. Friction firemaking leaves almost no archaeological trace. What we know is that by the time modern humans spread across the globe, they could make fire. They carried firemaking technology with them into every environment they colonized. It was one of the essential skills that made human expansion possible. Tool number 13. The fire plow, another path to flame. The fire plow is an alternative friction method found in some cultures, particularly in the Pacific Islands and parts of Southeast Asia. Instead of spinning a drill, you rub a hardwood stick back and forth along a groove in a softer wood board. The friction creates heat, the heat creates a coal, the coal ignites tinder. The motion is different from the fire drill. Instead of spinning, you push forward and pull back, again and again, pressing down into the groove. The friction point moves along the groove rather than staying in one place. Hot dust accumulates at the end of the groove. The fire plow requires different skills than the fire drill. It's more about rhythmic back and forth motion than spinning. The technique is arguably simpler to understand, but still requires practice to execute successfully. Some people find it easier than the drill, others find it harder. It depends on your body mechanics and what you've practiced. The existence of the fire plow reminds us that there's usually more than one way to solve any technological problem. Different human groups found different solutions to the same challenge. What matters is that they solved it. What matters is that they could make fire. Firemaking represents one of the most important transitions in human history. From dependence to independence. From hoping you could keep your fire alive to knowing you could create fire whenever you needed it. From vulnerability to security. A human who can make fire is fundamentally different from a human who cannot. The firemaker can go anywhere, can survive anything, can never be truly lost or helpless as long as dry wood exists. Tool number 14. The fire carrier, preserving precious embers. Even after firemaking was invented, it was hard work. If you could keep your fire going, you should. And if you had to move camp, you should take your fire with you. Enter the fire carrier, a device for transporting live embers from one place to another. Fire carriers took many forms depending on available materials and local traditions. Smouldering punk fungus was a common approach. Certain bracket fungi, the shelf-like fungi that grow on trees, will smoulder for hours when lit. They don't flame, just glow and smoke, consuming themselves very slowly. You could light a piece of punk fungus, carry it in a container or wrapped in leaves, and use it to start a fire at your destination. Similar slow-burning materials included certain types of dried plant material, specific barks, even carefully prepared bundles of damp wood that would smoulder rather than flame. The key was finding something that would stay lit for extended periods without consuming itself too quickly. Aboriginal Australians were famous for their fire-carrying skills. Some groups travelled with fire sticks, bundles of bark from specific trees that burned so slowly they could carry fire for days. The stringy bark tree was particularly valued for this purpose. Smouldering fire sticks were carried from camp to camp, carefully tended, providing continuous access to fire without the effort of starting fresh. Other groups used hollowed-out pieces of wood or gourds as containers for coals. Embers packed inside with insulating material, perhaps moss or ash, could stay live for hours. The container protected the coal from wind and rain, maintaining the precious spark until needed. The fire carrier was essential technology for mobile peoples. If you're moving camp every few days, following seasonal resources across the landscape, you don't want to spend the effort of friction firemaking at every new location. Better to bring your fire with you. Fire carriers also represented a form of insurance. Even if you could make fire, having a live ember ready meant you could start a fire in seconds rather than the minutes of hard work that friction firemaking required. In an emergency, in bad weather, when you were exhausted or injured, that difference could matter. The humble fire carrier isn't glamorous. It doesn't appear in museum displays or popular imagination. But it was vital technology, the link that allowed humans to maintain continuous access to fire even when moving constantly across the landscape. Together, these three fire technologies, fire drill, fire plow, and fire carrier, gave humans complete mastery over flame. They could create fire when needed, transport it when moving, and maintain it indefinitely with proper care. Fire was no longer a gift from the gods or a lucky find. It was a human technology, fully under human control. That control changed everything about what humans could do and where they could live. Chapter 4. The Domestic Toolkit Tool, number 15. The Bone Needle, Surviving the Ice Age. Let your mind drift now from weapons and fire to the quieter technologies of daily life. The tools that processed food and made clothing, that enabled the domestic routines without which no community could survive. The bone needle might be the most important tool you've never heard of. It's small, easy to overlook, just a thin sliver of bone with a hole at one end. But it made possible something that changed the course of human history: fitted clothing. Before needles, the only clothing available was draped hides. You could wrap a fur around your shoulders, you could tie a skin around your waist, but you couldn't create garments that fitted your body, that kept the cold out and the warmth in, that protected your extremities from frostbite. Draped clothing works fine in moderate climates. In tropical Africa, where humans evolved, you don't need much clothing at all. A simple wrap for modesty and protection from sun is plenty. Maybe some protection for your feet on rough ground, but nothing elaborate. The Ice Ages were not moderate. Starting around 100,000 years ago, the climate swung into a series of cold periods that would define the next 90 millennia. Temperatures dropped, glaciers advanced across Europe and northern Asia. Even in regions that weren't covered by ice, the climate became cold and harsh for much of the year. Humans couldn't survive those temperatures with draped furs alone. The cold crept in through every gap, every loose edge, every poorly covered extremity. Fingers and toes froze. Wind penetrated every opening. Body heat escaped faster than it could be generated. They needed real clothing, shirts and pants and boots and mittens and hats, multiple layers that could be combined and removed as conditions changed. Garments sewn tightly enough to stop the wind, insulated enough to trap body heat. All of this required sewing, and sewing required needles. The oldest known bone needles appear around 60,000 years ago, though the technology probably has older origins that haven't preserved. By the height of the last ice age, around 25,000 to 15,000 years ago, needles were common across the human world. They're tiny, these Ice Age needles. Some are less than 2 inches long, barely bigger than modern sewing needles. The holes drilled through solid bone can be remarkably small, just big enough to pass a thread of sinew. Making a bone needle required the precision work that Burin's enabled. You start with a splinter of bone, maybe from the leg of a deer or other large animal. You scrape it smooth with stone tools, shaping it to a uniform taper. You polish it until it glides easily through hide, and then, carefully, painstakingly, you drill a hole near the thicker end. Drilling through bone without breaking the needle is tricky. The bone is hard but brittle. Press too hard and it cracks. Go too slowly and you never get through. Ancient needle makers probably used stone points, twisted back and forth with steady pressure, gradually wearing through the bone until a hole appeared. With needles and thread you could sew hides together into any shape. You could create sleeves and legs and hoods. You could make watertight seams by sewing with sinew that swelled when wet, closing the stitch holes. You could attach decorations and reinforcements. You could repair damaged clothing instead of discarding it. The thread was usually sinew, the tough tendons from animal legs and backs stripped out, dried, and split into fine strands. Sinew is remarkably strong for its weight, and it has properties that make it ideal for sewing. When dry, it's stiff and holds its shape. When wet, it swells and becomes more flexible. Stitches made with sinew actually tighten when they get damp. Other thread materials were used too. Plant fibers where available, fine strips of leather, animal gut. But sinew was the most common, the default choice across most traditional cultures. The bone needle allowed humans to colonize the far north. Without it, the Ice Age tundra would have been uninhabitable. With it, humans lived and thrived where temperatures regularly dropped far below freezing. They hunted mammoths on the frozen steppes. They survived winters that lasted most of the year. They spread into environments that should have been lethal. Think about that the next time you put on a shirt or pull on your pants. You're benefiting from a technology that originated in the Paleolithic, invented by ancestors who needed to survive conditions that would kill you in hours without protection. The bone needle is one of the great unsung inventions of human history. Tool number 16. The grinding stone. Unlocking hidden calories. Seeds are everywhere. Grasses produce them by the millions, but seeds are hard to eat. Their tough outer shells resist chewing. Their nutrients are locked inside, inaccessible to human digestion unless that shell is broken. The grinding stone unlocked those nutrients. A grinding stone is simple in concept. A flat or slightly concave lower stone called a quern, or matete depending on the tradition. An upper stone called a mano or pestle that fits comfortably in the hand. You place seeds or grains on the lower stone and grind them with the upper stone, crushing them into flour or meal. This seems obvious to us, living in a world of bread and cereals and flour-based foods. But grinding technology had to be invented. Someone had to realize that crushing seeds would make them edible. Someone had to figure out the best stone shapes, the best grinding techniques, the right amount of water to add, how to process the resulting meal into food. Grinding stones appear in the archaeological record at least 30,000 years ago, and probably earlier. They become increasingly common over time, suggesting that plant foods processed by grinding became increasingly important in human diets. Think about what grinding does. The seed has a tough outer hull that your teeth can't easily break. Inside is the starchy endosperm, the energy reserve the seed uses to fuel its initial growth. That starch is what you want, but you can't get to it without breaking the hull. Grinding crushes the whole seed, hull and all, into a fine powder. The hull fragments are mixed with the starch. Together they form a flour that can be mixed with water, cooked, and eaten. The starch becomes available to your digestive system. Grinding opened up vast food resources that had previously been unavailable or barely accessible. The calories in wild grass seeds, which grow abundantly in many environments. The nutrients in hard-shelled nuts that are too tough to crack with teeth. The starch in roots and tubers that were too fibrous to chew effectively. All of this became accessible through grinding. Grinding was women's work in most traditional societies, and it was hard work. Hours spent kneeling at the grinding stone, pushing and rolling the mano back and forth. The motion is repetitive and physically demanding. Your arms and shoulders ache. Your knees hurt from kneeling on hard ground. The grinding motion wore grooves into the stone over time. Archaeological grinding stones often show these wear patterns, depressions worn smooth and deep by countless hours of use. Some grinding stones were used for generations, passed down and worn deeper with each user. The motion also wore on the body. Physical anthropologists studying ancient skeletons can often identify individuals who spent significant time grinding. Arthritis in the arms and shoulders, damage to the knees, were patterns on the teeth from accidentally consuming stone grit that ended up in the flour. But without that work, there wouldn't be enough calories. Plant foods processed by grinding provided the carbohydrate foundation that supported human groups. Meat was important, but it was unpredictable. Some hunts succeeded, many failed. Ground seeds and nuts were reliable. The grinding stone made survival possible in lean times. The grinding stone also represents a different relationship with food. Hunting is about pursuing calories that try to escape. Gathering is about finding calories that are simply there for the taking, but that require work to process. The grinding stone is the tool of the gatherer, patient and laborious, converting inedible raw materials into nourishing food. Tool number 17. Cordage, the invisible technology. If I asked you to name prehistoric technologies, you probably wouldn't think of rope. Cordage is so basic, so ubiquitous, that it's easy to overlook. But try to imagine prehistoric life without it. You can't haft a stone point onto a spear without cordage to bind them together. You can't set a snare without cordage to make the loop. You can't make a bow without cordage for the string. You can't build a shelter without cordage to lash the poles together. You can't carry gathered foods efficiently without a container, and most containers require cordage in their construction, even if it's just a drawstring to close a bag. You can't make fishing nets without cordage. You can't tie anything to anything else without cordage. Cordage is the invisible thread that holds the prehistoric toolkit together. It's so fundamental that we barely notice it's there. But without it, most other technologies would be impossible. Making cordage is time-consuming but not difficult. You take plant fibers, strips of bark, animal sinew, or other long, flexible materials, and you twist them together. The basic technique is simple. 2 strands twisted in one direction, then twisted around each other in the opposite direction. Create a stable cord that won't unwind. Try it with a piece of grass or a strip of paper. Twist the 2 ends clockwise individually, then let them wrap around each other counterclockwise. The opposing twists lock together. Pull on the ends and it holds. The physics of the twist makes the whole stronger than the sum of its parts. This basic technique can be learned in minutes, but making good cordage that's strong and flexible and durable, takes practice and skill. Different materials require different handling. Different uses require different thicknesses and strengths. A snare loop needs to be smooth and supple, able to tighten quickly without kinking. A bowstring needs to be strong and resistant to moisture, maintaining its length without stretching. Binding for a hafted tool needs to be tight and secure. holding the parts together under stress. Cordage for netting needs to be consistent in diameter, with reliable strength throughout. The materials vary by region. In North America, dogbane and milkweed provided excellent fibre. In the Pacific, various palms. In Africa, baobab bark. In cold regions, animal sinew was often used. Every environment offered some material that could be twisted into cord. Cordage rarely survives in the archaeological record because plant fibres decay quickly. We mostly know about prehistoric cordage from impressions left in clay, from fragments preserved in extraordinary circumstances like dry caves or waterlogged sites, and from ethnographic comparison with traditional peoples who still make cordage by hand. But it was everywhere. Every prehistoric group had cordage technology. Every toolkit depended on it. It's one of those fundamental inventions that made everything else possible. The time required to make cordage was significant. Modern cordage makers estimate that producing enough string for a simple fishing net might take days of twisting. Enough rope for a substantial construction project might take weeks. This time investment was built into prehistoric life, part of the background labour that kept communities functioning. Often cordage making was combined with other activities. You can twist fibre while watching children or socialising with others, or keeping an eye on something cooking. The repetitive motion becomes automatic with practice, requiring little conscious attention. Prehistoric peoples probably produced cordage almost continuously, building up supplies against future needs. The humble cord, just twisted plant fibres. But without it, humans would have been limited to tools that could be held in the hand, shelters that stood without fastening, weapons that were single pieces rather than compound assemblages. Cordage is the connective tissue of technology. Tool number 18, the container, carrying civilization. Humans are the only primates who routinely carry things around. Other apes occasionally carry food or tools for short distances, but nothing like the constant carrying that humans do. We carry food back to camp. We carry tools with us as we move. We carry children too young to walk on their own. We carry water, possessions, materials for projects, gifts for others. This carrying behaviour required containers. Think about trying to carry water without a container. You could cup your hands and carry a few swallows, but that's about it. You could find a natural depression in rock that holds water, but you can't bring it with you. Without containers, water stays where it is. The same with gathered foods. You could stuff a few berries in your mouth as you find them, but what if you want to bring them back to camp to share with others? Without a bag or basket, you can carry only what your hands can hold. The earliest containers were probably natural objects repurposed. Gourds, the dried shells of certain squash plants, make excellent water containers. Large shells from mollusks or tortoises could carry small items. Animal bladders and stomachs, when cleaned and dried, made natural bags. Our ancestors were opportunistic, using whatever would serve the purpose. Then came made containers, woven baskets from plant fibres, bags sewn from animal hide, bark containers folded and sealed with resin, eventually pottery, though that came relatively late in the prehistoric sequence. Baskets were probably among the earliest made containers. The technique is related to cordage making, using the same principle of interlacing flexible materials. If you can twist cord, you can probably figure out weaving. Baskets could be made in various shapes for various purposes. Shallow trays for processing seeds, deep baskets for storage, burden baskets worn on the back for carrying heavy loads, watertight baskets, woven so tightly and coated with pine pitch that they could hold water, or even be used for cooking by dropping hot stones into the liquid. Hide bags required sewing technology, so they came after needles. But once needles existed, hide bags became common. They're durable, flexible, and can be made in any size. A small pouch for personal items, a large bag for storing dried meat, a water skin that could be carried on long journeys. Pottery came later, probably within the last 20,000 years, becoming common only in the last 10,000. Clay vessels are heavy and breakable, but they have advantages that other containers lack. They can go directly on fire for cooking. They're impermeable without additional treatment. They can be made in unlimited quantities from widely available materials. Containers transformed what humans could do. You could collect more food than you could eat immediately and carry it back to camp to share. You could store food for later, surviving lean times on accumulated reserves. You could carry water away from its source, making it possible to live in places without immediate access to water. Without containers, humans would be limited to eating food where they found it and drinking water where it flowed. They couldn't accumulate, couldn't store, couldn't transport. Every day would be starting from zero. With containers, humans could plan ahead, gather in times of plenty for times of scarcity, build up reserves that buffered against uncertainty, carry the necessities of life wherever they went. Containers also changed social dynamics. Food could be pooled and redistributed. Resources could be shared across the group. The foundation for more complex social organization, where some people provided food and others provided other contributions, depended on the ability to move resources around. The humble container, nothing but something to put things in. But without it, human society as we know it couldn't exist. Chapter 5. Specialized Tools. Tool number 19. The fish hook. Harvesting the waters. Fish are an excellent food source. They're high in protein and fat, including omega-3 fatty acids that are crucial for brain development. They're relatively easy to catch once you know how, and they're abundant in rivers, lakes, and coastal waters across the world. But catching fish with bare hands is difficult. They're slippery, covered with scales and mucus that make them hard to grip. They're quick, able to dart away faster than human hands can grab, and they live in water, where human movement is awkward and slow. The fish hook solved this problem elegantly. A hook is a curved piece of hard material, bone or shell or thorn or eventually metal, with a sharp point at one end and a way to attach a line at the other. You bait the hook with something fish will eat, drop it in the water and wait. A fish takes the bait. The hook sets in its mouth, and you pull it in. The concept is simple, but the execution requires careful design. The hook needs to be shaped so that when a fish bites, the point catches in the mouth. Too straight and the fish can spit it out. Too curved and the point doesn't penetrate. The optimal shape, refined over thousands of years, is a specific curve that catches and holds. The oldest known fish hooks are about 23,000 years old, from a cave in Okinawa, Japan. But the technology is probably much older. Simple gorge hooks, straight pieces of bone or wood that catch in a fish's throat when swallowed, go back even further and may have been the precursor to the curved hook. A gorge hook is just a small pointed object tied at its middle to a line. The fish swallows it along with the bait. When you pull on the line, the gorge turns sideways and catches in the fish's throat or stomach. It's less elegant than a true hook, but it works. Making fish hooks from bone requires patience and skill. You need a piece of bone of the right size, usually a splinter from a larger bone. You carve it into shape, cutting the curve, pointing the tip, creating whatever attachment method you'll use for the line. The work is fiddly, and the pieces are small. Shell hooks are similar in concept but use different techniques. You grind the shell into shape rather than carving. Some shell hooks from the Pacific are remarkably sophisticated, with complex curves and carefully fashioned barbs. Fish hooks allowed humans to exploit aquatic resources efficiently. You could catch fish while doing other things, setting a line and checking it periodically. You could set multiple lines. You could target fish that were too fast to spear or too wary to approach directly. The development of fishing technology went hand in hand with the colonization of coastal areas and islands. The people who first reached Australia, over 65,000 years ago, must have had some fishing technology to survive the crossing and to thrive on a continent surrounded by rich marine resources. By the Upper Paleolithic, humans were expert fishers. They had not only hooks but also traps, weirs, nets, and specialized spears. They followed seasonal fish runs, moving to rivers when salmon were spawning, to coasts when certain species were abundant. They understood fish behavior and used that knowledge to harvest them efficiently. Fish became a staple food in many areas, particularly along coasts and rivers. The protein they provided was crucial for human survival and expansion. In some environments, fishing was more reliable than hunting, providing a consistent food source that anchored human communities. And it all started with the simple concept of a hook. Tool number 20. The awl. Punching through. Our final tool is modest but essential. The awl is simply a pointed implement for making holes. A bone awl is a bone sharpened to a point. A stone awl is a pointed stone flake. Either way, the purpose is the same, to punch holes in things. Why do you need to punch holes? For all sorts of reasons. To make leather goods, you need to punch holes for the needle and thread to pass through. Hide is tough, too tough to push a bone needle through directly in most cases. You first punch a hole with an awl, then pass the needle through. Think about what that means for clothing production. Every stitch in a sewn garment requires punching a hole. A simple shirt might have hundreds of stitches. That's hundreds of holes punched by hand, one at a time, before any sewing can happen. To make beads from shells or teeth or stones, you need to drill a hole to string them on. A rotating awl, twisted back and forth with steady pressure, can gradually grind through hard materials. It takes time, but it works. To make bark containers watertight, you might punch holes and then sew the seams with root fibers or sinew. To attach handles to tools, you might punch a hole through the handle for the lashing to pass through. To make fishing nets, the knots that form the mesh are often tightened with an awl to ensure they're secure. The awl is a simple tool for a simple task, but that task comes up constantly in prehistoric life. Every leatherworker needs awls. Every bead maker needs awls. Everyone who works with materials that need holes punched in them, which is almost everyone, needs awls. Like scrapers, awls are common at every prehistoric site where organic materials are preserved. They're unglamorous, utilitarian, utterly essential. They don't capture the imagination like a spear or a hand axe, but they made civilized life possible. And that brings us to the end of our 20 tools. 20 technologies spanning millions of years. 20 solutions to the problems of survival that your ancestors faced and solved. Chapter 6. The Toolkit Complete. Let your mind hold all 20 tools now. 20 inventions that span millions of years in every habitable continent. 20 solutions to the problems of survival that your ancestors faced. The stone tools: chopper, hand axe, blade, scraper, burin. The foundation of everything. The original technology that set humans apart from other animals. Stone was what was available. Stone was what our ancestors learned to shape. Stone was the material that launched 3 million years of technological progress. The hunting tools: wooden spear, stone-tipped spear, Atlatl, bow and arrow, snare, bola. The weapons that made humans apex predators despite our physical limitations. We have no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons at all. But with these tools, we became the most dangerous hunters the world has ever seen. The fire tools: fire drill, fire plow, fire carrier. The technologies that gave humans control over flame, one of nature's most powerful forces. Fire cooked our food, warmed our homes, lit our nights, and frightened our predators. Mastering fire was mastering a piece of nature itself. The domestic tools: bone needle, grinding stone, cordage, container. The equipment that made daily life possible. Processing food, making clothing, binding things together, carrying essentials from place to place. These aren't dramatic tools, but without them, the dramatic ones would be useless. The specialized tools: fishhook and awl. Targeted solutions to specific problems. Evidence that human technology didn't stop at general-purpose tools but proliferated into specialized implements for every task. These 20 tools are your inheritance. They're the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, each one building on what came before. Every tool represents thousands of years of refinement, of trial and error, of gradual improvement, and they're still with you. The blade became the knife and the scissors and the scalpel. The needle still sews, though now it's made of steel and often powered by motors. The container still carries. The concepts remain even as the materials have changed. You are the descendant of toolmakers. The same creativity, the same problem-solving ability, the same ingenuity that invented these tools is present in your brain right now. It's what makes you human. When you face a problem and figure out a solution, you're continuing a tradition that stretches back over 3 million years. When you pick up a tool and use it to make your life easier, you're doing exactly what your ancestors did in caves and camps across the prehistoric world. The tools made us, and we made the tools. An endless loop of creation and adaptation that continues to this day. Chapter 7. How tools changed us. The tools changed more than just what humans could do. They changed who humans were. They changed human bodies, human minds, human societies. Consider what tool use did to the human hand. Our hands are unlike any other primates. We have long thumbs that can fully oppose our fingers, touching each fingertip with precision. We have fingertips with exceptional sensitivity, packed with nerve endings that can detect the finest textures. We have fine motor control that allows precise manipulation of small objects. These features didn't evolve by accident. They evolved because they made us better tool makers and tool users. Over millions of years, natural selection favoured individuals who could craft better tools and wield them more skillfully. The hand was shaped by the tools it shaped. Look at your hand right now. Flex your fingers. Touch your thumb to each fingertip in turn. Feel the sensitivity in your fingertips. All of this evolved for tool use. Your hand is a tool-using organ, sculpted by 3 million years of selection for technological ability. The changes went beyond just dexterity. Human hands are proportioned differently from ape hands, with shorter fingers relative to thumb length. This makes precision grip easier, the grip you use to hold a pen or thread a needle. It's less useful for climbing through trees, but more useful for making and using tools. The evolution of the hand is a story written in bone and muscle and nerve, a physical record of our technological past. You carry the evidence with you every time you pick something up. Consider what tool use did to the human brain. Making a hand axe isn't simple. It requires planning, visualizing the finished tool inside the raw stone before a single flake is struck. It requires sequential reasoning, understanding that this blow must come before that one, that each step builds on the previous. It requires fine motor control, coordinating eye and hand to strike with precision. It requires problem solving when things go wrong, adapting when the stone doesn't break as expected. These cognitive demands drove brain evolution. Our ancestors' brains grew larger over time, and they grew in specific areas associated with planning, coordination, and spatial reasoning. The prefrontal cortex, which handles planning and decision-making, expanded. The parietal cortex, which processes spatial information and coordinates action, expanded. The areas controlling fine motor movement expanded. Some researchers argue that tool-making was the driving force behind human brain evolution. The cognitive demands of creating and using tools selected for larger, more capable brains. Those larger brains then enabled even more sophisticated tools, which selected for still larger brains, in an accelerating feedback loop. The same cognitive abilities that made tool-making possible also made language possible. The sequential reasoning required to shape stone is similar to the sequential reasoning required to construct grammatical sentences. The planning required for complex tool production is similar to the planning required for complex communication. The two abilities may have evolved together, each reinforcing the other. Tools and brains evolved together, each driving the other, in a feedback loop that eventually produced the extraordinary human mind. Your brain, with its capacity for abstract thought and complex reasoning, is the product of 3 million years of tool-making pressure. Consider what tools did to human societies. Tool-making created experts and apprentices, teachers and learners. Not everyone was equally skilled at making tools. Some individuals, through talent or practice or both, became master craftspeople. Others learned from them, creating chains of knowledge transmission that spanned generations. This created social roles based on skill rather than just physical dominance. In most animal societies, status comes from physical strength or aggression. The biggest, strongest, most aggressive individuals dominate. But tool-making created alternative paths to value. The flint knapper who could make the best tools was valuable, even if he wasn't the strongest fighter. The grandmother who knew how to find food in hard times was precious, even after she could no longer bear children. The patient teacher who could pass on complex skills was essential for community survival. Tools created ways for people to contribute beyond their physical prime. A hunter's strength fades with age, but a knapper's skill might only improve. A gatherer's mobility decreases, but her knowledge of plant locations and properties remains. Tools extended the productive lifespan of individuals and increased the value of experience and knowledge. Tools also created trade. If your group lived near a good source of flint and your neighbours didn't, you had something valuable to exchange. Trade networks for stone tools extend back hundreds of thousands of years, with materials sometimes travelling hundreds of miles from their sources. Trade created connections between groups. It created incentives for peaceful interaction rather than conflict. It spread ideas and innovations along with physical materials. The first human social networks, the webs of relationship and exchange that connected distant communities, may have formed around the trade in tools, and tools created time. The efficiency gains from better tools meant that humans didn't have to spend every waking moment on survival. A better hunting weapon meant meat came faster. A better grinding stone meant food processing took less time. A better shelter meant less energy spent on warmth. The surplus time created by efficient tools could be spent on other things, on art and ritual, on social bonding, on innovation and experimentation, on the activities that make human life more than mere existence. Without tools, humans would still be one small-brained primate among many, grubbing for roots and running from predators. With tools, humans became something unprecedented. A species that could adapt to any environment without waiting for biological evolution. A species that could accumulate knowledge across generations. A species that could eventually leave Earth itself. That's what these 20 tools represent. Not just clever solutions to practical problems, but the foundation of everything humanity has become. Chapter 8. The Tools Within You. As you drift towards sleep, I want to leave you with one more thought. The tools I've described were physical objects, rocks and bones and fibres and wood, things you could hold in your hand, things that were made and used and eventually lost or broken. But there are other tools, tools that exist not in the physical world but in the mind, tools that our ancestors developed alongside their stone axes and bone needles, tools that you carry with you right now. Language is a tool for communicating ideas, for coordinating action, for sharing knowledge across time and space. Think about what language lets you do. You can describe something that isn't present. You can refer to the past and speculate about the future. You can share information about things you've never seen, based on what others have told you. You can argue and persuade and negotiate. You can teach complex skills through verbal instruction. Your ancestors developed language over hundreds of thousands of years, refining it generation by generation, until it became the remarkably sophisticated tool you're using to understand these words. Language is technology, just as surely as the hand axe. It's a made thing shaped by human use, passed down through learning. Mathematics is a tool for understanding quantity and relationship, for predicting outcomes, for modelling the world. It started with simple counting. 1 deer, 2 deer, 3 deer. How many days until the salmon run? How many baskets of acorns will we need for winter? Over time, counting became arithmetic. Arithmetic became geometry and algebra. Eventually, mathematics became the abstract systems that describe the universe at its most fundamental levels. All of it a tool, a technology of thought, invented and refined over generations. Story is a tool for transmitting culture, for encoding values, for making sense of experience. Every story you've ever heard is part of a tradition stretching back to those first campfires where our ancestors gathered to share tales. Stories teach us how to behave, what to value, who we are. They pass wisdom from old to young, from generation to generation. They entertain and comfort and warn. These mental tools are just as important as the physical ones. They're what allowed physical tools to accumulate across generations. They're what allowed humans to cooperate at scales no other species can match. They're what allowed the 20 tools I've described to become millions of tools, billions of tools, the entire technological civilization that surrounds you now. And you have access to all of them. The accumulated wisdom of 3 million years of human ingenuity, physical and mental, is your inheritance. You didn't have to invent language or mathematics or storytelling. You received them from the generations before you, just as they received them from the generations before them. You are the beneficiary of the longest chain of innovation in history, and you are also a link in that chain. The tools you use, the ideas you have, the problems you solve, all of it contributes to what humans will inherit after you're gone. That's a lot of responsibility if you want to think of it that way. But it's also a profound gift. You're connected to all of humanity, past and future, through this chain of tools and ideas. You're part of something much larger than yourself. Chapter 9. The Maker's Hands. Picture hands working stone. Not your hands, but the hands of an ancestor deep in the past. Watch them move. The stone is flint, fine-grained and grey. It came from a stream bed 10 miles from here, carried in a leather bag. Precious because good stone is hard to find. The maker has been working this piece for 3 days now, shaping it towards something only they can see. The hands are calloused and strong. The fingers are nimble, used to this work, trained by years of practice. There are old scars from times when the stone slipped, when flakes flew the wrong direction, when the work was still new and clumsy. Now the hands move with certainty. They know this stone, have learned its character through days of patient attention. They know where it wants to break, where it resists, where the finest flakes will come off with just the right touch. A strike. The crack of stone on stone. A flake falls away, revealing a surface that gleams in the firelight. The maker tilts the piece, examining the result. Satisfied, one step closer to what they imagined. These hands made the tools that made our world. Hands like these, across millions of years, shaped the stone and bone and wood that became the human toolkit. Patient hands, skilled hands, hands that knew what they were doing, that carried the knowledge of generations, that passed that knowledge on. Your hands are descended from those hands. The genes that built them, the neural circuits that control them, all of it connects back to those ancient makers. When you pick up a tool, when you manipulate something with care and precision, you're using an inheritance millions of years old. The hands rest now. The stone is set aside, half finished, waiting for tomorrow. The fire crackles low. The maker sleeps, dreaming perhaps of the finished tool, of the hunt it will enable, of the life it will sustain. Tomorrow the hands will work again, and the day after, and the day after that. For 3 million years, hands like these have worked, have made, have created the world we inhabit. Rest now, toolmaker. Your hands have done their work for today. Chapter 10. The Unbroken Line. There's a line that connects you to the very first tool, an unbroken chain of making and using, teaching and learning that stretches back 3 million years. Someone made the first chopper, the first deliberately shaped stone. They showed someone else, or someone else watched and figured it out. That knowledge passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, across hundreds of thousands of years. Someone improved the chopper, made it better, created the hand axe. They didn't invent from nothing. They built on what came before, improved it, passed the improvement on. The chain grew stronger, the toolkit more sophisticated. Someone invented hafting, combining stone and wood. Someone invented the spear thrower. Someone invented the bow. Each innovation building on everything that came before. Each innovator standing on the shoulders of all who had gone before them. Someone invented friction fire making, freeing humans from dependence on found flame. Someone invented the bone needle, enabling survival in the cold. Someone invented basketry and cordage and containers, the infrastructure of civilization. Each of these people was real. Each lived a full human life, with joys and sorrows, hopes and fears. Each figured something out and passed it on. Each was a link in the chain that connects the distant past to you. You've never met them. You don't know their names, couldn't possibly know. They lived and died thousands of generations before writing existed. But you're connected to them nonetheless. Their innovations shaped your world. Their creativity made your life possible. And the chain continues through you. The things you make, the problems you solve, the knowledge you pass on, all of it becomes part of what future generations will inherit. You're not just receiving from the past, you're transmitting to the future. This is what it means to be human, to be part of a chain of knowledge and creation that spans millions of years, to inherit the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, to add your own contributions, however small, and pass everything on. The line is unbroken. From the first shaped stone to the device playing these words, the line continues, and as long as there are humans, it will continue. Hands making tools, mind solving problems, knowledge passing from old to young. You are part of something vast, something that stretches back to the beginning of human technology and forward into a future you can't imagine. Something that connects you to every human who ever lived and every human who ever will. Rest now, knowing you belong, knowing you're part of the great human project of making and creating and passing on, knowing the chain is unbroken and you are a link in it. Conclusion. The toolmakers sleep. Rest now, toolmaker. The tools are put away. The fire is banked for the night. The shelters are secure. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new things to make and do. But for now, you can rest. The tools will wait. They've waited millions of years. They can wait until morning. Let your mind drift across the landscape of human history. See the first chopper, struck from stone 3 million years ago by hands that would recognize yours as kin. See the hand axe, perfected over 1 million years of patient refinement. See the blades and scrapers and berins that multiplied human capabilities beyond anything evolution could provide. See the spears that brought down mammoths, launched by arms no stronger than yours. See the bows that fed families through endless winters. See the snares that caught game while their makers slept, just as you sleep now. See the fire drills spinning between ancient palms, smoke rising, coal forming, flame blooming in the darkness. See the ember carriers crossing vast landscapes, precious fire preserved for the journey ahead. See the hearths where families gathered, where stories were told, where tools were made and knowledge was shared. See the bone needles sewing warm clothing against the Ice Age cold. See the grinding stones unlocking calories from stubborn seeds. See the cordage binding everything together, the invisible thread of technology. See the containers carrying the necessities of life across landscapes and generations. See the fish hooks pulling protein from the waters. See the awls punching holes for 1,000 purposes. See the whole toolkit, 20 tools strong, built up over 3 million years by hands like yours. See all of it, this magnificent accumulation of human ingenuity, stretching across 3 million years and touching you tonight. You are the inheritor of all of this, the beneficiary of countless innovations, each one building on what came before, the latest link in a chain that stretches back to the very beginning of human technology. Sleep now, knowing that you belong. You belong to the species that makes tools, that solves problems, that refuses to accept the world as given, and instead remakes it according to human needs and human dreams. The tools are waiting for you. They'll be there when you wake. Sleep well, descendant of toolmakers. Dream of hands shaping stone. Dream of fires kindled in the darkness. Dream of the endless human creativity that made your existence possible. Tomorrow you'll pick up your tools again. You'll solve problems, make things, add your own small contributions to the chain. But tonight, rest. The work is never finished, but you've done enough for today. Sleep now. The tools will keep. Bonus. Chapter: Tools we almost forgot. There are tools we haven't discussed. Tools that were essential but didn't make my list of 20. Before you drift off entirely, let me tell you about a few more. The digging stick. Perhaps the simplest tool that ever existed. A pointed stick for digging. That's it. Nothing fancy. Nothing requiring elaborate manufacturing. Just a stick, sharpened at one end, used to pry things out of the ground. But think about what a digging stick enables. Tubers and roots, buried underground, storing carbohydrates that the plant uses to survive drought or winter. Without a digging stick, these are nearly impossible to access. The ground is hard. Your fingers are soft. You can scratch at the surface, but you can't reach what's buried deep. With a digging stick, you can pry up yams and cassava and wild potatoes. You can dig for water in dry riverbeds, excavating down to where moisture remains. You can extract burrowing animals from their holes. You can plant seeds in prepared holes, which eventually led to agriculture. The digging stick was probably the first tool that women used systematically, since gathering was typically women's work and digging sticks were essential for gathering underground foods. It's been found in every traditional culture that relied on gathered plant foods. It's simple, it's universal, and it fed humanity for millions of years. The throwing stick. Not every thrown weapon is a spear. The throwing stick, sometimes called a rabbit stick or killing stick, was a simpler implement designed to be thrown at small, fast-moving targets. Picture a curved piece of hardwood, maybe 2 feet long, flattened to reduce air resistance. You throw its sidearm, spinning it through the air. When it hits a rabbit or bird or other small animal, the impact stuns or kills it. The Australian boomerang is a specialised version of this tool, designed to return to the thrower if it misses. But most throwing sticks weren't boomerangs. They were meant to hit something and stay there. Throwing sticks were particularly useful for hunting in open terrain where small animals were abundant. The Australian outback, the African savanna, the American prairie. Places where you could see prey at a distance but they'd bolt before you could get close enough for a spear throw. A skilled throwing stick user could bring down a running rabbit at impressive distances. It takes practice, but the technique can be learned. And unlike arrows, throwing sticks are easy to make and nearly indestructible. You could use the same stick for years. The hammerstone. Every flint napper needs a hammerstone. It's how you strike flakes from a core, how you shape raw material into finished tools. The hammerstone is the tool that makes other tools. Finding a good hammerstone is a skill in itself. It needs to be the right hardness, hard enough to fracture flint but not so hard that it shatters on impact. It needs to be the right shape, fitting comfortably in the hand, providing good control over strike force and angle. It needs to be the right size for the work you're doing, larger for rough shaping, smaller for fine work. Ancient knappers often kept their hammer stones for years, becoming familiar with their particular characteristics. A really good hammer stone was precious, carried from camp to camp, used for countless tools. You can see use wear on ancient hammer stones, battering marks where they've struck thousands of blows. Some have been shaped to improve the grip. Some show different wear patterns on different areas, used one way for heavy work and another for fine detail. The hammer stone reminds us that toolmaking required tools of its own. Technology has always been layered, tools enabling the creation of other tools, each generation of implements requiring a previous generation. The firehearth fire needs a home. You can't just set things on fire anywhere and expect it to work well. The firehearth, a prepared area for building and maintaining fires, was essential technology even though we might not think of it as a tool. A good hearth is flat and stable. It's protected from wind, which can blow sparks dangerously or extinguish flames entirely. It's positioned so smoke vents properly, not filling the shelter. It's surrounded by a ring of stones that contain the fire and reflect heat inward. The arrangement of stones matters. Some hearths were designed for cooking, with flat stones that could serve as griddles or supports for containers. Others were designed for heat, arranged to radiate warmth in particular directions. Some had channels to direct airflow, improving combustion. Ancient hearths show evidence of repeated use, built up layers of ash and charcoal from countless fires. Some were used for generations, the same spot where ancestors and descendants alike kindled their flames. The hearth was the centre of domestic life, the place where families gathered, where food was prepared, where stories were told, the sleeping nest. Even sleep required technology. Humans are unusual among primates in that we sleep on the ground rather than in trees. This made us vulnerable to ground predators but freed us from the constraints of arboreal life. Ground sleeping required preparation. You couldn't just lie down anywhere. You needed a spot that was dry, reasonably soft, protected from wind, defensible against predators. You needed bedding materials to insulate you from the cold ground and cushion your body. Archaeological sites show evidence of prepared sleeping areas, compressed vegetation where grass and leaves were gathered into nests, arrangements of hides and furs, fire nearby for warmth and protection, the technology of sleep. Modern mattresses and blankets are just elaborations on this ancient theme. We're still preparing sleeping places, still gathering materials to make rest more comfortable. The instinct to build a nest, to prepare a proper place for sleep runs deep in human nature. The walking staff. When humans began walking long distances, they discovered the value of a simple stick for support. The walking staff is perhaps the most overlooked tool in human history, but for our ancestors who travelled constantly it was essential. A good walking staff provides stability on uneven ground. It helps you cross streams without falling. It takes some of the load off your legs on long marches. It can be used to probe ahead in tall grass or murky water. And in a pinch, it's a weapon. Every shepherd, every herdsman, every travelling merchant throughout history has carried a staff. The tradition goes back to the earliest human migrations. We are a walking species, and the walking staff helped us walk farther. The baby carrier. Human infants are helpless for far longer than the young of any other primate. They can't cling to their mothers the way baby chimps can. They have to be carried constantly for the first year of life and frequently for several years after that. This created a technological challenge. A mother carrying an infant in her arms can't do much else. She can't gather food effectively. She can't contribute to group tasks. She needs help, or she needs a tool. Baby carriers, slings made from hides or plant fibers, freed mothers' hands while keeping infants safe and close. Archaeological evidence for baby carriers is sparse because they're made from perishable materials. But every traditional culture has them, and they probably go back hundreds of thousands of years. The baby carrier was a social technology as much as a physical one. It allowed mothers to participate in group activities. It allowed the work of childcare to be shared, with others sometimes carrying the baby. It changed what mothers could do, and therefore changed how human societies functioned. The rhythm of technological life. Let me take you through a day in the life of a toolmaker. Not a specific day, but a typical day. The rhythm of life that persisted for hundreds of thousands of years. You wake before dawn. The fire has burned low through the night, tended by whoever was on watch. First task, feed the fire. Add fuel carefully, building the flame back up without smothering it. The fire drill and fire plow exist. But why use them if you don't have to? Keeping the existing fire alive is always easier than starting fresh. Breakfast is whatever's available. Perhaps some leftover meat from yesterday's hunt, cold now but still nourishing. Perhaps tubers roasted in the coals the night before. Perhaps nothing at all, just a drink of water and the knowledge that today's work will produce today's food. Then the day's activities begin. These vary by season, by location, by what's currently needed. But they always involve tools. Perhaps today is a gathering day. The women and older children head out with digging sticks and containers, following trails the grandmothers know, to patches where tubers grow thick. They'll dig all morning, filling their baskets, chatting as they work, teaching the children which plants are which. Perhaps today is a hunting day. The men have spotted game and planned an approach. They check their weapons, ensuring the hafting is tight, the points are sharp, the bowstrings haven't stretched. Then they set out, spears and bows ready, moving toward where they expect to find prey. Perhaps today is a making day. Supplies are good, there's no urgent need to gather or hunt, and the toolkit needs maintenance. Scrapers have grown dull and need resharpening. Cordage supplies are low. Someone's spear broke on the last hunt and needs replacing. The day is spent at camp, hands busy with familiar tasks. The tools shape the day. What you do depends on what you have to do it with. A day without sharp cutting tools is a day when certain tasks are impossible. A day without fire is a day of cold food and cold nights. A day without containers is a day when you can only eat what you can eat, right where you find it. But when the tools are ready, when the kit is complete and in good condition, the day opens up. Possibilities expand. You can tackle whatever challenges the environment presents because you have the means to address them. Midday brings rest. The heat is too much for heavy work, so you find shade and wait it out. This is social time, grooming, conversation, the work of maintaining relationships. Children play while adults relax. Perhaps someone tells a story. Perhaps there's singing or laughter. The tools wait, patient, ready for when work resumes. Afternoon brings more work. The gathering party returns, baskets full. The hunters come back, perhaps successful, perhaps not. Either way, there's processing to do. Plants need to be cleaned and prepared. If there's meat, it needs to be butchered, the hide scraped if it's worth keeping, the good parts distributed according to the group's customs. This processing work is where many tools see their heaviest use. Scrapers work the hides, blades cut the meat, grinding stones process tough plant materials, the fire roasts and renders, the containers store what isn't eaten immediately. As the sun sinks, the day winds down. The fire is built up for the night. The group gathers around it. Food is shared. Stories are told. Children fall asleep in their mother's arms. Weapons are checked one more time. The watch is set for the night, and then sleep. Another day survived. Another day of tools used and maintained and relied upon. Tomorrow will bring the same cycle, the same tasks, the same dependence on the toolkit that makes human life possible. This rhythm persisted for hundreds of thousands of years. It was the human condition for far longer than anything we call civilization. Your body and mind evolved to fit this rhythm. The sense of satisfaction you feel when you finish a day's work, when you rest by a fire or a glowing screen, when you share a meal with others, all of this connects back to that ancient pattern. The tools made that pattern possible, and the pattern, repeated millions of times, made you. The learning never stops. What I've shared with you tonight is just the beginning. Human technology didn't stop with these ancient tools. It continued, accelerated, exploded into the unimaginable complexity that surrounds you today. From the first chopper to the smartphone, the line is unbroken. Each innovation built on what came before. Each generation inherited the tools of their ancestors and added their own improvements. The Metal Age replaced stone with copper, bronze, then iron. Agriculture replaced hunting and gathering with farming. Writing replaced oral tradition with permanent records. The scientific revolution replaced intuition with systematic investigation. The Industrial Revolution replaced muscle with machines. And it continues. Right now, someone somewhere is inventing something new, solving a problem, creating a tool, adding another link to the chain that stretches back 3 million years. That's the human story, not a story of beings who arrived complete and perfect, but a story of beings who kept learning, kept improving, kept passing on what they knew. A story of tools and the minds that made them. You're part of that story. Every problem you solve, every skill you learn, Every insight you share adds to the human project. You don't have to invent something world-changing. You just have to participate. Learn something. Teach something. Make something a little better. The chain continues through you. The deep time perspective. Let me leave you with one final thought experiment as you drift towards sleep. Imagine a timeline stretching from the first tool to now, 3 million years compressed into something you can visualize. If that timeline were a single year, with the first chopper struck on January 1st, here's where things would fall. The hand axe would appear around February 15th. Fire use would be confirmed by June. Anatomically, modern humans would appear in mid-October. The bow and arrow would arrive around November 20th. Agriculture would begin on December 29th. All of recorded history, everything you learned about in school, every empire and civilization and war and revolution would happen on December 31st. The entire modern era, from the Industrial Revolution to now, would happen in the last hour of the last day. That's the scale we're talking about. 3 million years of tool-making, of problem-solving, of gradual accumulation, and most of it invisible to us, lost in the deep past, known only through scattered stone tools and fragmentary bones. Your ancestors walked that immense span of time. Generation after generation, they survived and made tools and passed on what they knew. Against all odds, against predators and climate and disease, they persisted, and here you are, the inheritor of all those millions of years, the beneficiary of all those countless innovations. You exist because they existed. Your world is possible because of their tools. Final rest. The night deepens. Your breathing slows. The ancient rhythm of sleep, the same rhythm your ancestors followed around their fires, pulls you down toward dreams. The tools will keep until morning, all 20 of them, the chopper and the hand axe, the blade and the scraper and the burin, the spears and the atlatl and the bow, the snare and the bola, the fire drill and the fire plow and the fire carrier, the needle and the grinding stone, the cordage and the container, the fish hook and the awl. They've waited 3 million years. They can wait a few more hours. Sleep now, toolmaker. Dream of hands shaping stone. Dream of fires kindled against the cold. Dream of the vast span of time that connects you to everyone who came before. You are the inheritor of all those million nights of sleep, all those million mornings of waking to work, all those million days of making and doing and surviving. The chain is unbroken. You are a link in it. Tomorrow you'll pick up the tools again, but tonight, rest. Sleep well, descendant of makers. The tools will keep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from tonight. I check the comments and it's amazing. Tokyo at sunrise, London at midnight, Sao Paulo at twilight. All of us connected across time zones, falling asleep to the same ancient story. Sleep well, wherever you are. End of script, final word count. Approximately 35,800 words, the rock overhang that provides shelter. Around the fire sit maybe 30 people. The whole band gathered as they gather every night, in the only truly safe space that exists in their world. The firelight pushes back the darkness, creates a circle of warmth and visibility, holds at bay the predators whose eyes occasionally gleam at the edge of the light. An old man sits at the centre, working on a new spear point. His hands move with the confidence of decades of practice. Strike, examine, rotate, strike again. Each blow precisely calibrated, each flake falling exactly as intended. The other adults watch occasionally, not closely, because they've seen this 1,000 times. But the children watch intently. They're learning. They're absorbing. A woman nurses an infant while her older child plays with a discarded stone core, practicing the striking motion, not producing anything useful but learning the feel of it. Her mother sits beside her, grinding seeds on a flat stone, the rhythmic motion as automatic as breathing. The meal she produces will feed the group tomorrow. 2 young men examine their bows, checking the strings for wear, straightening the arrows in their quivers. Tomorrow they'll hunt. Tonight they prepare. The hunt will succeed or fail based largely on whether their equipment is ready. They take the preparation seriously. Near the edge of the firelight, an older woman scrapes a hide. She's been working this hide for 3 days, and it's almost ready. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, it will become a new wrap for someone in the group. Her scraper moves in steady strokes, the same motion her mother made, and her grandmother, and countless women before them. Stories are being told. The old man working the spear point is describing a hunt from his youth, 50 seasons ago, when the big cats were bolder and the game was different. The young men listen, trying to extract useful knowledge from the entertainment. Where were those hunting grounds? Could they be used again? A grandmother tends the fire. This is her job now. Has been since she grew too old for foraging. The fire is her responsibility, her contribution to the group. She feeds it carefully, neither too much nor too little, keeping the flame steady through the night. She'll doze in snatches, waking to add fuel, always making sure the fire survives until dawn. Children are falling asleep, curled against their mothers or grandmothers, lulled by the voices and the warmth, the sound of steady scraping, the tap of stone on stone, the crackle of flames. These sounds mean safety. These sounds mean home. As the night deepens, the stories wind down. Adults arrange themselves for sleep, close to the fire but not too close. Someone will keep watch. Several someones in rotation through the night. The fire must be maintained. The children must be protected. The darkness must be guarded against. The old man finishes his spear point. He examines it in the firelight, turning it, checking the edges. Good. It's good work. Tomorrow he'll haft it to a shaft and the weapon will join the arsenal of the group. One more tool, one more advantage, one more reason they'll survive another season. He sets the point aside and lies down to sleep. His hands are tired but satisfied. He's done good work. He's contributed. He's passed on knowledge to the watching children. He's played his part in the endless human project of making and teaching and surviving. The fire burns on. The stars wheel overhead. The predators prowl beyond the light but don't approach. Another night passes safely. Tomorrow they'll use these tools, these 20 tools and others, to gather food and process materials and maintain their kit. Tomorrow they'll work and teach and learn. Tomorrow the chain of knowledge will extend a little further, but tonight they rest. Tonight the tools wait beside sleeping hands. Tonight there's nothing but warmth and safety and the crackling of flame. This scene, or something very like it, has been repeated billions of times across human history. Every night for millions of years humans have gathered around fires, maintained their tools, passed on their knowledge, and slept in the protection of flame and community. Tonight, you're continuing that tradition. You're gathered in your shelter, your modern home. You're surrounded by your tools, your modern devices. You're receiving knowledge, these words I'm speaking, passed from my mind to yours. And soon you'll sleep, as your ancestors slept, as humans have always slept after the work of the day is done. The fire has changed form. Now it's the glow of electric lights, the hum of heating systems, the warmth of well-insulated walls. But the function is the same: safety, comfort, a space held against the darkness. The tools have changed form. Now they're machines and electronics, complex beyond anything your ancestors could imagine. But the purpose is the same: extending human capability, solving human problems, making human life possible and worth living. The chain continues, from those first campfires to your bedroom tonight, from those first choppers to every device you own, from that first old man crafting a spear point to every maker and teacher and learner alive today. You're part of this. You've always been part of this. The tools that surround you are your inheritance from 100,000 generations. The knowledge in your head is their legacy to you. Sleep now, knowing you belong, knowing you're part of something vast and ancient and ongoing, knowing the tools will keep as they've always kept until morning brings the work again. Rest well, toolmaker. The chain continues through you.